Hey everybody, here we are. It's Voyager time. We made it. We finished up Star Trek Enterprise.
Here we go.
we gotta get ourselves hyped. We gotta get ourselves amped because most of our heroes don't appear on those stamps. And we're gonna start talking about Voyager right now, which is the latest Star Trek episode or Star Trek series that we're gonna be covering. Clay, how are you? Welcome to Voyager.
I'm good. I'm ready to do this. Jumping into this new series with an action-packed first double episode with one of the most exciting stories I've ever seen in Star Trek. So it just bodes well for the rest of the and what a good idea of a character Neelix is, isn't he? He doesn't seem like that's going to be a problem at all.
He wears Quark's clothes and he's got funny hair. But Quark's also in this episode too, but we'll not get too far into that. We're here with Voyager with the pilot episode called Caretaker, which is a two-parter. And I just want everyone to know, also this week, that this episode is coming out. Picard Season 2 is coming out. And you say, are you going to cover Picard Season 2? We are covering Picard Season 2. Aren't you excited? Here's the catch. It's only on patreon.com/thepenskyfile. So if you guys are interested in hearing our thoughts about Picard Season 2, you got to let it rain on patreon.com/thepenskyfile. All of the episodes will be available for the people there at the $5 and up tier. So if you want to listen to Picard, $5 on Patreon every month, and you'll get every single episode. Those will be coming out on probably this Friday or this Saturday after the episode comes out on Thursdays. And Voyager, as you're finding out now, is going to be coming out on the Tuesday, I think. If this is Tuesday, that's the day it's coming out. So, with that said, let's get into Voyager. This is Caretaker. It is the first and second episode of Star Trek Voyager. It's a double-length episode. It came out on January 16th, 1995. It is the 343rd of, right now, as it stands at this moment I'm talking, 829 released Star Trek things. Teleplay goes to Michael Piller and Jerry Taylor. Story credit goes to Rick Berman, Michael Piller, and Jerry Taylor. Directed by Heinrich Colby. In-universe date is 48315.6, which is 2371. In this episode called Caretaker, the newly commissioned starship Voyager and a Maquis raider are flung into the far reaches of the remote Delta Quadrant by a powerful entity known as the Caretaker. So, Clay, I think
I've got some questions right off the bat.
Sure. Do you want to talk about the stream quality or the video?
No. I will talk about that. This came out in 1995?
Yes.
Okay. Man, I thought it was earlier than that. For some reason, I thought it was 93.
So this is 2 years after TNG ended, and it's like second season, almost third season of DS9 is when this came out.
Wow. My understanding of when these shows were on the air is completely wrong, and I've been talking about them for 7 years.
This one ended in 2001, which I think is stranger. Like I don't remember it running that long, but it did. But if you remember, in DS9's second season, there was a bunch of Maquis episodes towards the end of that, and that was the seeding ground for what Voyager was going to do. I guess
in my mind, I thought Deep Space Nine started later, because when you said this was 95, I was like, oh, I didn't realize that this was actually before Deep Space Nine, but that wouldn't make any sense because Quark's in the episode. He's clearly a Deep Space Nine. The place is in the episode.
They just liked that setting and that character so much, they wrote a whole show around him after this pilot was done.
Yeah. Wow. It's so strange because to have these shows kind of all running concurrently, because it does get a little bit difficult to keep track of them, at least in my own head. But
as I said, if I could redo the podcast, I would watch all the episodes in production order, because I think that would be a really interesting, especially around this time where the shows are overlapping with each other. It's probably not interesting in any other time that the franchise is running.
Well, once we hit the end of Voyager, we're going to need something to do. So
back to Enterprise. So
just like in the original Legend of Zelda, once you beat the game, it's like, now go back and play the same game, except the colors are inverted and it's harder.
This is the Shadow Realm. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about that besides the timeline, or should I get into my thing here?
No, just go for it.
So I think a good place to start is we just came off of Enterprise, which we've been entrenched in for a very long time, 2+ years. And now we're moving to Voyager. I find it's hard for me to avoid, even if I don't think we're going to talk about this for many episodes, how Voyager immediately compares to Enterprise, because it was something I noticed quite starkly how different they are.
Same.
Voyager feels much more like Next Generation, I would say. It feels like the earlier Star Treks in a way that Enterprise never really got around to feeling, which is not a criticism, because if Enterprise had done what it was doing better, I might say that's a nice fresh start for Enterprise right there. The thing that is interesting to me here is that I don't think Caretaker is a great episode of TV or anything like that, but I felt that the characters here, I can walk away from Caretaker and give you a pretty good description of what each character is about in a way that I'm not sure after 4 seasons of Enterprise I could describe Malcolm Reed in the way that I could describe Neelix, Tuvok, Harry Kim even is kind of like blandly well defined here. I thought that the biggest difference here between this and what we've coming off of Enterprise is that it's clearly a pillar script in that he believes strongly in the characterization of things. And I thought that if anything else, this pilot did a pretty good job of showing you what each of these characters are about in relatively little amount of time. And you have a solid understanding of where everyone stands by the end of it.
Yeah, 100%. I know more about, and I don't mean this just like from an exposition standpoint, but I know more about Captain Janeway as a character in 2 episodes of this than I know in 4 seasons of Jonathan Archer.
Yeah.
Like she's very, very well defined as far as what who she is, what her personality is. She doesn't take shit, but she's also really compassionate.
A little bit of a chip on the shoulder with the woman thing. She doesn't like to be called ma'am. They call it captain. She is the first captain to come from a science background, which is interestingly, they play that up a bit. Yeah, they play that up a bit because she's very technical in the problems that she encounters. She knows a lot about how the warp reactor is working and stuff like that. But that is her background. Yeah. She's not strictly command. She didn't always wear the red uniform. She came from a science background. That's why she's on the captain of this Voyager ship.
And I just like all of the side characters, I feel like make an impression pretty quickly as far as like what they're about. I mean, Tuvok stands out just because, he's a fantastic Vulcan. He's so really good.
This podcast is just going to be me talking about how Tuvok is a better Vulcan than T'Pol was the entire time. My favorite scene...
Or anybody else on Enterprise.
Yeah, anyone else on Enterprise. My favorite scene in this one is the scene that ends the first episode where it's Janeway and Tuvok talking in her ready room or whatever it is at that point.
Yeah.
That's good Vulcan writing and acting there, where he says, Vulcans don't worry about anything. And she says, well, they wanted me to let you know that they miss you. And he takes a beat and he says, I miss them too. And then just walks out the room and stuff like that. It's like, that's good. That's good stuff.
And it's, I think that's a good follow-up scene from the first scene with the Maquis on the Voyager, because it shows the other side of Janeway's character where she has no problem getting up into Chakotay's face and backing him down.
Yeah.
But at the same time, she's legitimately concerned about everybody and getting home because she wants to get home. She's got a dog
and a husband.
She learned from her history class not to take the dog on the ship with you.
Yep. Yeah, I thought that the characters are all. I don't think any of them are particularly cliche. Like Neelix kind of falls into that sort of like tough character that you look at him, you're like, this guy's just going to be annoying for a while, isn't he? I really like Tuvok. I think that some of the stronger ones are like Tom Paris surprised me as like he's almost a focal point of the episode.
Yeah, I've got some thoughts about Paris.
Okay.
I am interested to see what they do with him, but I almost feel like he might be miscast.
Okay.
Because I think all of the characters do kind of stand out as fairly unique, except for him.
Oh, really?
Because he's basically like, he's like 2 create your player clicks away from Connor Trenier, basically. He's got big Bruce Davison energy.
Mm-hmm.
And the stuff that he's talking about his past is really cool, but he just looks like 90s white guy actor to TV white guy actor to me.
Yeah.
Like, he looks like he has a bunch of episodes of Silk Stockings in his resume, you know? And it's just like, I'm sure I'll grow to like him more, but of all of these characters, I so far find him the least interesting. But I do think his story is actually pretty interesting. So I think it's one of those weird kind of things where I don't know if the actor quite jives with the story of the character, but you know, I'm obviously open to be proven wrong here.
Yeah, I didn't mind him. I also like his story, and I think that he's a decent enough actor where it can the show can kind of rest on him as a point of view character. From like, it's strange. It's either him or Harry Kim could kind of be described as like the main focal point of this one in a way that I don't think Janeway's even that central of a character.
I don't know, because I mean, I think what they actually do pretty well in this is they don't have a singular audience avatar character that exists through the whole episode, because I think traditionally or another show would start you off through the point of view of Harry Kim, which is basically what they do, and just kind of stay there. Whereas this one kind of, once he gets onto the ship and you start meeting people, they start passing that off. Yeah. So it's not just him. Sometimes it's Paris. Sometimes it's Janeway. It's really, I would say Janeway, Paris, and Kim are probably the three that they bounce between the most.
Yes, as focal characters. I would. It's funny you thought that Paris was probably least favorite. I think Chakotay stood out to me as useless in this one. Really, like he kind of struck me as a strange character who you kind of feel like he's building, or he's going to be a different way because he's the leader of the Maquis crew that comes on board. You think he's going to butt heads a little bit more with Janeway, and we don't have to get into it right now, but the show made a strong decision to not have them maintain a Maquis identity by the end of it, which we can talk about in a little bit. But I was surprised that Chakotay is kind of set up as a counterpoint foil to Janeway, but he immediately subjugates himself to her and is like, no, she's the captain. We listen to the captain. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I thought most of the people were good. I thought that the two weakest to me were B'Elanna Torres, mostly because her and Harry Kim scenes when they were together was pretty awful. I thought it was like that was like peak Caretaker plot, and I didn't care.
Yeah, I don't even really know what was going on with them. I was honestly, during those scenes, I was very distracted by the actual visuals and like quality of the stream that I was watching, because this is an SD show. It has not been. It's never been remastered for HD, and I don't know if like you know how you can buy a movie on Blu-ray. Like, let's say a movie like Night of the Living Dead. You can buy Night of the Living Dead on Blu-ray, fantastic HD copy or whatever. But then if you go to Best Buy and go into that like 3 for $5 bin, you'll find a DVD copy of Night of the Living Dead that was put out by some no-name company, and it's like $4 or probably even cheaper, and it just looks terrible. That's what this looked like to me. This looked like we got the entire series for $5 copy of
we did
Caretaker.
yeah,
I guess we kind of did.
We got it on sale on Vudu, and I noticed. Well, so I guess that we might as well get this out of the way now. I noticed issues, but I didn't notice the issues you were talking about. But when I went back and watched it after you pointed out what you were talking about, I noticed that in certain scenes, but I just wasn't noticing it the rest of it. The thing that stood out to me was, and I hope this is just Caretaker, where it's because, as people were saying on the Discord, they were trying to split it into 2 episodes instead of a 1.5 hour feature. So they had to do some cutting. I thought that a lot of the scenes, especially the ones that were obviously going to commercial, were cut as if they were trying desperately to save 2 seconds on the end of everything. So it would be like the music would swell and it would just hard cut to the next scene, and the music would stop, and it would not have the commercial in between that would allow you to gradually come back into the next scene in that sequence. And it was really jarring in a lot of ways. Like the video looks terrible because it's standard definition from 1995, and it's like 5 pixels on the screen. You can barely see anything. But I thought that the way this was cut together was really odd and amateurish, and hopefully that stops. Otherwise, we're going to have to go to Paramount Plus and watch it on that after this.
Yeah, the problems I was having was there were these like horizontal kind of like strobing bars that would appear, and it happened a lot in the first scene with the Maquis ship flying through the nebula or whatever. And anytime there was like a energy-based special effect that took up like a solid portion of the screen, I could see it really clearly. It was just like chopping right
I
through
noticed
everything.
it in darkness when the Voyager gets shot into the 1,000 light years away or whatever. When everyone's picking themselves up and the lights are off, that's when I really noticed it at that point. So it must be some kind of blacks thing, like a blacks in the image is not really.
It was, I actually just shut off Discord, so I don't have it in front of me, but one of our listeners explained what it is.
Yeah,
and it has something to do with for which they did to shows to make them go on older TVs better, but it doesn't work. It makes it look terrible when you upgrade them when you watch them on HD TVs.
Yeah. So,
but the other thing, on top of, the only thing I was going to say, there was a couple moments where the mute, kind of like what you're saying about the music cutting and stuff, but what happened in one specific scene, it happened twice, is you'd have to be at the end of one scene, the music would start to swell, it would cut, not like a commercial cut, like cut to the next scene, and the music, which clearly should have continued into the next scene, is just gone. There's no sound other than the dialogue. And then the next cut, the music comes back, and it's very clearly in the middle of the music where it should have been. There was a connective piece of sound that was gone.
Yeah.
I don't even know how that happens. Like where does that happen? Is that how it was on TV when they played it the first time?
Yeah, I don't know.
Or is this somewhere in like a
shitty DVD
crunching everything for streaming? Yeah, I don't know. But I was disappointed in the quality of it. It looked worse than I expected it to, and I think it's not the show's fault. I think it's just the encoding or whatever that Voodoo has was not great.
Yeah, we'll see how Paramount Plus works on it too. I think it might just be the way the show looks at this point, because honestly, like Voyager is the first series to not use 100% models in the ships, and it's pretty obvious in parts where, like when the little Maquis ship is flying through the Badlands or something, it looks like a horrible 1995 render of space, and it's like, ooh, that doesn't look very nice at all. But we'll see. Enough about that, I suppose. I guess we can discuss more of the characters as we move along. But I guess so this pilot is kind of, to me, a tale of two stories. It's the tale of the pilot introduction aspects, where you're trying to launch a new series, and it's the tale of the Caretaker plot, which is something that runs in the background and eventually takes over in the second episode. My big criticism with this one, I think, is that too much time is spent on the Caretaker plot, and I wish they had not been shot by the Caretaker into their action sequence until the second episode. I was enjoying the scenes on Voyager early, where people are starting to come onto the ship and like everyone's meeting each other. I'm like, oh, this feels nice, especially after Enterprise, where I didn't know any of the characters. Everyone seems here to have a point, and they're talking to each other, and they have interesting relationships. They go to the Delta Quadrant about 15 minutes into the episode, and at that point, the Caretaker plot seizes control. And I think the Caretaker plot feels like 3 different TNG episode plots that they mixed together, and they spat this thing out. It's not very original. I think it's kind of boring. And ultimately, the worst part is that when the Caretaker at the very end talks to Janeway and they have their heart-to-heart, Janeway's solution to him is like, that's the obvious solution, bud. Like, this is not a profound thing that Janeway is telling you, that you just have to tell the Ocampa how to live their own lives and stop caring for them. I was a little bit underwhelmed by how laissez-faire and lackluster that was by the end of it. It's kind of a boring sci-fi plot, I think.
Yeah. I thought it was unfortunately dull. Like, I could see this being a plot maybe a handful of episodes into the first season, but it as a let's launch a new show story, I don't think this is it. It also, I was surprised that after so many years of Star Trek watching ships fly into nebulas and whatnot, and mostly come out unscathed, I thought it was kind of hilarious that they fly into this nebula and then they end up in the Delta Quadrant as though they had just been attacked by the entire Borg fleet. Mm-hmm. Like, it was like the ship, half the people on the ship are dead.
Yeah.
Everything's exploded and on fire and shit. And I don't know. It just seemed underwhelming.
It was
for me to get to that point.
Yeah, it's underwhelming is the way I would
they just kind of, they fly into the purple stuff and then all of a sudden the screen goes white or whatever, and they come back and everybody's dead. And it's just like, I was expecting something a little bit more interesting and engaging, I guess. I guess I would say that for the whole 2 episodes, because I really like the characters. And I think more time spent with them the better in these first 2 episodes. But I don't know, going to this alien thing, and it turns out, it's a farm, but wait, it's not really a farm. It's actually pretending to be a farm based on human memories.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a bad version of the Matrix, basically.
Yeah. The one thing that was kind of interesting was the idea that they were trying to find 2 life forms that were like biocompatible in order to procreate. That could have been a lot cooler and creepier, I think.
Yeah.
Than Harry Cam looking like he fell asleep on a bunch of gushers. But it was just like all the time they spent walking around. It was one of those things where it's like, what is this driving towards here, right? Because they spend so much time like walking around with Harry and B'Elanna, telling them like the history of their people and all this other kind of shit, and it's like, what for what?
Yep.
None of this matters. Like, this is not going to matter. And then the K is like, is it the Kazon? Is this the Kazon, right?
The Kazon are the desert people.
Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, is this the first time thing they've been in? Because I've definitely heard that name before.
Yes, they're recurring villains in the series, but this is the first time we've seen them.
Are they on lower decks?
They might be. As a reference, I can't think of a Kazon character.
Oh, okay. Just because I feel like it's a familiar sounding name, but I can't think of a time that it's been in the show.
I think people in comments and Patreon comments have been saying, wait for the Kazon. If you were disappointed by like the Suliban, wait for the Kazon, I think is the thing. They're generally considered to be underwhelming characters. Yeah. I was going to say, is that sarcastic, or are we actually looking at some good characters here? Based on this, probably the former. Yeah.
That stuff was like whatever. I had a lot of questions about that. Like, they don't have any water, but they've got like a ship that's 5 times the size of Voyager.
Voyager's there's a good point. So Voyager is kind of unique. Voyager is small. It's not much bigger than the NX-01 Enterprise. It's only got a crew of 150. Yeah. It's in the Enterprise, I think, had 80 something. The TNG era, the 1701D had like over 1,000 people. So the Voyager is a small ship, really, compared to other things. Mm-hmm. It's fast and agile is what they talk about. That doesn't seem to do anything for it, but when it gets sucked out, has new computer systems. I interrupted there just to talk about how different the Voyager is than the other ships that we've seen. It's small, which is kind of interesting, but it is going against a bigger Kazon ship for some reason, which looks like a Jawa trash ship from Star Wars.
Yeah, it does. Yes. But, like as far as that goes, I found that a little bit confusing because like the Kazon are these like desert people who are presented to you as like a savage desert race.
Yep.
But to the point where when Janeway showed up and was like, I'm going to magically manifest water out of the sky. I was thinking, is this a Prime Directive situation? Like, do the Kazon, are they a spacefaring people? Yep. I have no idea. They don't seem like it.
No, they give you no indication that they should be spacefaring, but they are.
Yeah, and on the one hand, I kind of appreciated that, where if Janeway was like, listen, we're 70,000 light years away, the Federation is not out here, let's just do whatever the fuck we got to do to get out of here. But apparently they are spacefaring, and they've got a gigantic ship, just like squaring the way they were presented on the planet versus the ship that they had. Excuse me. Was a little bit weird to me. And yeah, it was just like, I don't know. I wish they had, I think there's a better story baked into, you've got a Federation crew and a Maquis crew that are put together in this situation, and they have to work together through their shit to figure out how to handle it. I think there's a story in there that doesn't need as much, recycled B or C level Star Trek stuff.
Yeah, I think that it runs into a problem here with a pilot plot, and that like the pilot has to introduce a lot of characters. It has to sort of set up the way that the show is going to go. And you have to deliver this interesting plot that ideally, I think, would combine all of what your setup is in the show into something that really exemplifies what is going on in this show. And I think that the Caretaker plot fails there because I think that the show undersells what happens to Voyager and the decision at the very end about what to do with the Caretaker and the Ocampa. So when the Voyager is captured at the very start, as you were saying, it's just like they get hit by that wave, it cuts to black, and then they all wake up and they're like, oh, what happened? I think that when you show what happens to Voyager, I think they visually should have really amplified the fact that this thing is going far. Like Voyager is being launched somewhere. Yeah. It's like it's so when you get there and they say like we're 70,000 light years away, there's actually some kind of like visual impact to what that means. It doesn't just sound like next episode we'll head home and we'll be home again. And then at the very end, I think that it ultimately fails because I don't feel that the story builds convincingly to this point where Janeway is making a kind of heart-wrenching sacrifice to save these people, but it strands them in this Delta Quadrant. And to come up to your point, I think that what should have been happening here is that there are Starfleet characters and Maquis characters. I can see Janeway and the Starfleet characters taking this, we have to help this culture cause. I think the Maquis, even if it's not the way that they've been set up, have to take a counter, we need to get home for our own good cause, because the Maquis have been fighting for their own beliefs or something, and leading to this. They want to get home, Janeway doesn't.
Or vice versa, honestly. Because I mean, like if you've got the Federation in that situation, I could see that going the other way, where the Maquis characters are more compassionate towards the ones who seem like they're fighting against something and trying to preserve their own way of life, and the Federation is like, well, no, we don't need to get involved here. We need to just go home.
Right.
So I could see it going the other way.
Story-wise, that has to set up the
question that I
Maquis
had.
as win. Like the story-wise, the Maquis have to win that argument because they have to get stuck out there, And I think that the show wants Janeway to make that decision for them, so she's the one that says we give up. But just to hit it home, my problem with the Caretaker plot is that I feel that the decision that Janeway comes to should be like a wrenching. She discusses with the other characters about what they need to do. Everyone kind of has feedback about whether or not they want to go home. Some voices want to go home, some want to stay. What's the right thing to do? And then ultimately they make this decision that strands them there. But they help the Ocampa in a way that I can actually see something. It's not so abstract that I'm like, yeah, I guess you helped them. They'll be okay going forward. Mm-hmm. It needed something more dramatic, like I needed them immediately to be facing death or something like that.
What are their options at that point? I mean, what's the decision that she has to make? I don't remember the exact decision.
Well, it would be either they help the Ocampa or like they force the Caretaker to. You'd have to build the story in a way that the Caretaker can actually be forced to be able to send them home or something.
Okay. So this is not something that you're saying actually happens. In
the
show.
I'm just saying that in my opinion, the plot is lacking because it doesn't have this pull to it.
Yeah, I think you're right, because there is, by the end of this episode, I don't really know how this has really established much for the series, other than the fact that in an offhand line, you get like the Caretaker equivalent of when Luke flies off in Empire Strikes Back, and Obi-Wan's like, well, that's it. And then Yoda goes, no, there is another. Oh, okay, well, hopefully they expand on that in the next movie.
We better find that guy.
He's like, nah. Yeah, he's like, nah, my sister's out there somewhere. And then it's like, yeah, they don't have any other choice. It's either they stay on the planet, which they're not going to do because it's a desert planet and full of war and stuff, or they try and get home. It's not really, you're not really presenting these characters with any sort of interesting choice. I mean, I kind of, from that standpoint, I don't totally mind it because I do like the idea that they are in this situation which they are completely powerless, and it's not about whether or not they are choosing to go home, or it's more about how those two groups of people on the ship clash with each other, and about the methods they take to get to that goal.
Yep.
Now, my question for you, because I'd be curious to see what you think about this, is, and I think this is a failing of the episode. One of the reasons I'm asking this is, which series do you think has the bigger Star Trek canon buy-in? Like, amount of stuff that you really should know before you start the show. Do you think it's this one, or do you think it's DS9?
DS9.
You DS9? Okay.
I think so.
My thought was this one.
Okay.
My thought was this one only because so much of it hinges on the Federation and Maquis relationship.
Yes.
That I don't really know if you get a good sense of what the Maquis are about.
You didn't read that incredibly fast scroll at the start that told you?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I read that. But it's like, they talk about that a bit. We've been doing this show for years. I still don't 100% really know what the deal with the Maquis is.
Sure. That's an interesting question. I just know
that they're angry at the Federation.
Yeah.
And like by the time you get to the end of this episode, I was legitimately surprised that they went from Maquis guys to, no, we're all just wearing Starfleet uniforms now. I was legitimately shocked by that. Yeah. Especially like what you're talking about with Chakotay. Chakotay is set up as this Maquis commander who then is like, now is deferring to Janeway for no reason other than the fact that I guess she's the captain of the ship. Yeah. I guess
he buys into the system. Really, that's it.
Yeah. And I mean, Paris makes sense that he kind of buys back in because he seems to be kind of ping pong in between the things. But like, it's just, I don't know. It seems like they're taking the interesting element of the concept and really smoothing it out just to make it easy for people who don't know what's going on with the Maquis. Yeah. Because by folding everybody back into Starfleet, you're just a regular Star Trek show now, right? Yes. It's not really, I mean, I'm sure it'll come up in passing here and there as they talk about stuff in the future episodes. But like, I mean, maybe this is just modern TV seeping into my brain when I'm thinking about this, but you would think that they would go, I don't know, half a season, maybe a whole season before you see those guys in Starfleet uniforms again,
Yeah. And on the real world level, it was a production decision made at the time. Rick Berman actually made this decision. He insisted that they become Starfleet uniform wearing by the end of it. I would agree that, like, to me, what makes this interesting...
I was just going to say, I don't think that that's impossible to do.
No.
I just think you got to have a barn burner of an episode to get to that point and not have it feel like just lukewarm decision.
Right. I mean, if they had ignored the Caretaker plot for a little bit longer and built up the Maquis and Starfleet differences and for someone like yourself, reminded you that the Maquis are former Starfleet officers who have given up their oath to Starfleet in order to fight against what they consider to be like Cardassian hostilities against their planets, and that the Federation sold them out and stuff like that. So what's built into it is the thing that the Janeway decision is that the Maquis should in this episode take an opposite opinion about what they want to do to go forward. And that should be the sort of like battle lines. The way that you're saying they end up in the same uniform is that if Janeway's decision is convincing enough that they don't entirely go back on their beliefs, but they recognize that to get back home, we all have to kind of work together, and the Maquis adopt their former uniforms again. That kind of makes sense to me. As to what you're saying, the plot is not strong enough to convince me that anyone has achieved this goal of explaining to Chakotay why this would happen.
Yeah, like they have conflict. He and Janeway have conflict for about 30 seconds in this episode when they first show up. And he's like, Starfleet, we don't need your help. And then she's like, sounds like you're missing people the same way we're missing people. Maybe we should work together. And he's like, yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah. And then he's just like all in at that point.
Yeah. Though B'Elanna yells, and she's like, she yells at Janeway. She's like, what the hell are you doing? He grabs her by the arm and says, she's the captain. Damn it. She does what she wants. That's why Chakotay's so underwhelming to me. That it's just not a good characterization for him.
Yeah, and like the minute you put them into Starfleet uniforms, you take away any tension that's there. Yeah. I mean, I guess it's there. It's implied that it's there because, like I said, they're probably going to talk about it when it comes up when they need to. But like, is there a more? I don't want to use the word emasculating, but like, is there a more homogenizing thing to do to a group of people who are against the Federation or don't believe in the Federation than for them to shut up and put Federation uniforms on?
They won't give Neelix one though. They won't give him a poor guy a uniform.
Yeah,
these
I know. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he gets to wear. They gave him a gun.
Yeah, a phaser.
They go down there and they're in the thing and Paris is like, take your phaser out and shoot the rock. I can't believe they gave him a gun.
Yeah.
Yep. Why did they give him a gun after he lied to them the first time? They're like, here's a gun.
Neelix is interesting because I understand his point as a character does seem kind of necessary, really, where it's like, we're out here, we don't know what we're doing, we need a guide who could be along. It's unfortunate that he is the way that he is, although I don't think he's horrible here. I mostly find him bearable because in the scenes where he is at his most Neelixy, he's balanced against Tuvok, who's talking to him, and it kind of balances out the scene where it's like, okay, this is funny. Yeah. Tuvok clearly hates him, and he doesn't recognize that that's the case. Those are okay. Neelix is another kind of a thing of that, like, they made a pretty interesting decision, in my opinion, that the Delta Quadrant to this point has been portrayed as primitive compared to the Federation. They don't have transporter technology out there as far as they can tell. Everyone's kind of amazed by that.
It's because the Borg just bought up all the pieces.
They took everything.
People can't go out there and build their own computers. The Borg are building their gaming computers light years away.
The supply chains are broken down. So what did you think of that decision? I think that's kind of neat because normally I think the knee-jerk instinctual thing is that they go somewhere where they are not as advanced as the place that they're going to. Yeah. I don't think I totally recognize that's going to be like the thing. But yeah, that is pretty interesting to me, I guess. I'll be curious to see how long they can keep that up without it getting kind of stale. But yeah, I do like the idea that they are stuck in a position where they could be prime directive issues everywhere they look. Yeah. But they also need to talk to people to figure out how to get home and stuff like that. So what'd you think of the prime directive coming into this episode? I feel it's kind of ham-fisted, and I don't know if it's really the discussion that they should be having at this point, which is kind of ties into my point about they don't focus on the right thing with getting home, which is what I consider to be the point of this. Like, so to lay it out before we get into the prime directiveness, I would have to rewrite this for myself. I would have spent much longer at home in the opening episode where you meet a lot of people. I really like the Janeway talking to her husband thing, or whatever that guy is. If it's not a husband, I like talking about the dog. I like getting a sense that these people actually exist they have a home there. There is a place where they belong.
Right.
And what that would do would make the bad part of the Janeway and Tuvok scene at the end of the first episode where Janeway's like, oh, Harry Kim's mother called me right before we left and said, did she have time to bring him a donut or something? I said, no, we have to go. If they had actually had moments like that where before they separated them, you go like, oh, there is a family out there. And then to build it into getting home, not being able to get home is actually a real sacrifice that hits you viscerally. Like you understand that these people are not going to be going back anytime soon. They basically committed themselves to a death sentence trying to get home. None of them are going to get home by this thing. And if they had focused on that as the emotional core, instead of turning into some kind of prime directive
right
thing.
Now.
What's that?
What you're describing right now is that episode of Discovery that you hated where they spend 20 minutes writing letters to each other's parents.
But that's because they didn't make it
jump into the future.
What was I don't even remember. What was the decision at that end? Oh, was that jumping into the future? That's what they were doing.
Yeah, they're choosing to jump 3,000 years into the future or whatever it is.
That's not nearly as interesting. But I think that they get distracted by the Prime Directive stuff at the end of it, where Janeway's talking about this for some reason. I don't really understand what it has anything to do with anything because they can all fly in space. They don't know where they are. I just think that was the difference.
It was a kind of a loose Prime Directive conversation where I think they were talking about the Prime Directive in reference to getting involved with the Caretaker's influence on the planet or something like that.
Yeah.
And it stood out to me because I was like, yeah, I feel like going down to the planet and bringing 1,000 gallons of water, which seems to be more valuable than gold on this desert planet, is the same level of putting your thumb on the scale as it's still a Prime Directive thing. You're still in interfering with these people's culture. Yeah, it does. It does feel fairly ham-fisted. I think I'd
argue Caretaker brought them into it. Caretaker bringing them into it negates the Prime Directive, in my opinion, because it's not your doing,
Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, I think it would be a conversation worth having if it meant anything to the episode. Like if someone did call out Janeway for that, and that's part of the conversation they're having, I think that would be kind of interesting. But I don't really know if that stuff is necessarily needed.
Right, like if it's Janeway refusing to violate the Prime Directive is what causes them to get stuck in the Delta Quadrant. Like if there's a commitment to principle there, which I guess is kind of what they're hinting at, but it's not.
That's tough, man.
It's a hard argument to make.
Yeah, that's if you start your new show with your captain stranding an entire ship 75 years from home just because she doesn't want to ask a question to a primitive culture, I think that's a tough buy-in for your new lead character for sympathy reasons.
It certainly is. I mean, we're discussing into what the show could do, but if you have a Maquis crew, the show can be an examination of Starfleet values in that sense. Like, so you could almost say that Janeway makes a mistake sticking to Starfleet values early, and it causes them to get stuck there. And then being so far from the Federation, you're left with this question of what do Starfleet values mean out here? Like, are you willing to die for these things that don't seem to be doing you any good at this point? Yeah. I think there was space for it. It just never came around. So to abruptly change gears, I think there's a competition for the best pilot of these series between Caretaker and Emissary. I would say that for what I like out of a Star Trek episode, Emissary is by far the better pilot episode here, where the difference is that I don't think DS9's pilot sets up its characters nearly as well. Odo in particular has that scene where he says, "Take me to that place because I don't know where I came from and I think I might be out there." And they go, "Okay, Odo, you come with us." It's really clunky, bad character work, except for Sisko. And Sisko's central story is the antithesis of what the Caretaker central story is, which I don't care about the Caretaker story, but Sisko's poetic discussion with the prophets about how time and memories are kind of intertwined and you can't escape your memories, so therefore you're stuck in a circle of time with them and stuff like that. He's dealing with the loss of his wife, taking care of his kid. That hits me in a way that Caretaker nowhere near hits me in any kind of way that this is supposed to be. So, before I throw it to you, that was intentional on the production side. I was reading on Memory Alpha. Pillar and Berman wanted this to be the antithesis of what they said overly heady pilot for DS9, which I disagree with. They wanted to have this be a romp-em, shoot-em-up adventure of a pilot.
Well, kind of missed the mark on that one, too.
Neelix had a phaser.
Yeah.
Just blast everything.
Yeah, sure did. Yeah, romp 'em, shoot 'em up. Let's walk around in white robes for 25 minutes.
They had that loose pilgrim woman who was trying to get their pants off the entire time. That's action adventure right there.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest problem for me, is that this Caretaker story, I don't feel like reflects any of the issues, questions, conflicts, or values of the concept of the show that they're establishing. It feels completely divorced. It's just there to be a mechanic. And like if you get to the point where Janeway's having that conversation with the blob guy, and whatever they're talking about is thematically relevant to everything that they are now stuck in, that's a different story, but that's really not what happens. It's just like, here's Tuesday on Star Trek, they talk to a banjo playing blob guy.
Yeah.
And it feels like, I think it's a matter of push and pull with this kind of stuff, right? Where it's like, if your character story is A+, then your actual like moment to moment story doesn't need to be Hamlet here. But I don't think any of them, I think they're all kind of like running at the same speed, and it's not really like an interesting speed.
Yeah.
And so nothing is giving room to the good stuff. It's like three people standing at a doorway going like, no, after you. Mm-hmm. And nobody wants to go through the door. It's just like there's nothing driving the thing forward into like, okay, this is what we're doing. This is the exciting stuff. You're just kind of like hampered by nothing taking charge in this story. As much as, like I said, as much as the character work is good, the characters are there. They just don't do anything with them that really moves anything along or makes it work to a point where but by the end of this episode, like by the end of this two-parter, I should be thinking, man, you got a crew of people who are on two sides of the equation here, two sides of the fence. They have to work together. I can't wait to see what these guys are going to have to do to work together to get home.
Yeah.
And that's not it. It's just like, we're all kind of cool with each other. Strap in. It's a long ride.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll stop every now and then to go to the bathroom.
That's why it takes longer than 75 years or whatever. They're not going peak speed that whole time. Yeah, I think that, to me, I walk away from DS9's Emissary pilot going, it's the story of a man who kind of thought that he lost everything and had given up on life in a lot of ways, being reinvigorated for this new phase of his life. And that's where the start is. And I think that that's the emotional core of DS9's appeal. The Voyager one, I think...
I can't believe they call that heady.
I know.
There's nothing more emotional than my wife is dead. And my wife was killed by the actions. Yeah, my wife was killed. My son lost his mother due to the actions of a coworker as part of this thing that I've given my life to. And now this guy's sending me out to fucking nowhere to say, like, this. I think it's pretty easy to buy into that one to what the emotional stakes are here.
I disagree with their concept of heady, although if they think this is a romp 'em, shoot 'em up adventure, I would disagree with their understanding of what that is too. But I think...
Don't worry. They figure it out by the time Enterprise starts.
Fair enough. Pillar's gone by then. It's just Berman. So I think that...
He was holding me back.
Just to wrap it up for the Voyager thing, to me, that emotional resonance to match DS9's resonance and make me care about it really needs to focus on the sacrifice of being stuck out there. That's key to me. Like, even more than the Maquis and the Starfleet disagreements about things, it's the fact of we took the engine out of our car and we're 300 miles from home. Like, this is too bad, but let's put a brave face on and move forward and stuff. That would have been what Voyager needed to do, in my opinion.
You said that Q plays a large role in this series. The first time Q shows up, does Janeway immediately go, hey, can you transport us back home? Because I know that you can do that.
I have to assume, and he must have a good reason. I mean, he'd have to do it. I wonder what that conversation goes like, though. So we'll see. Yeah. I actually don't know. Like, again, I'm fairly unfamiliar with the series. I know that the caretaker mentions his sister or something, and then Janeway at the very end goes, we know there's another being out there just like that guy who can do things like that. I don't know if they actually meet this person. I'm not sure they do. It might just be an idea.
Great.
It might just be a pilot thing that they have. I don't.
The core MacGuffin to their series never gets brought up again. Awesome.
It might. It has strong. This is one of those pilot thing vibes for me. It's like, yeah, we'll let the audience know that there's something out there that maybe we can run into, and we'll see. But
yeah.
So let's do a.
I actually, in that moment when she was saying that, I did find that strange because she's like, there's another thing out there that could possibly transport us home. We're going to find it. Mr. Paris, set a course for home. Is that the right way?
I better hope that he's in that direction.
What's a better use of time? Just driving towards home or actively trying? It's going to take us 75 years to do one of them. We may as well waste a handful of years trying to find this other thing. Maybe it'll zoom us home. I don't know. Yeah. You're the captain.
Before we go, we'll do like a little bit of a lightning round because I have a bunch of beats I wanted to ask you about. But so with the close of this pilot, what's your sense of the setup? I like Voyager's setup. I think it's a really good idea. I think that this is a good idea for a Star Trek show, to divorce yourself from everything, to separate yourself from home. I think the execution is a little bit lacking, but I do think that this core idea of a series is as good or better than DS9s or Enterprises or anything like that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's a great setup. Great idea. Just a couple stray things that I noticed. Entirely human crew when they launch, which I don't think we've seen in a while.
Yeah. Yep.
Until they pick up the Maquis, everybody on is human. The guy, the doctor, the original doctor, the human doctor, and the guy who was the first officer, 100% thought it was the same actor.
I know.
Wearing two different uniforms.
You called Tom Paris generic identical. White guy. Those two have the same haircut. They die the same way.
But yeah, I think it's a great setup. I just think that I'm actually a little bit surprised that they go so light on it in the first episode, because it feels like the kind of thing that you would lean into like really heavily as a hook in your first episode, and then like things kind of even out as you go. Yeah. But this one, they just iron everything out real quick, and so yeah,
They're pros. These guys are pros. They know this kind of stuff happens all the time. Yeah.
Gene would have loved it.
Yeah.
Whereas, I watch the pilot for Discovery and I get kind of excited about the possibilities of where it might go, only to be disappointed later. Maybe that's it. Maybe they're just saving my own emotions by just getting it out of the way quick and be like, this is not going to be as cool as you hope it's going to be. So just buckle in for mid-range Star Trek for 7 seasons.
Why not? Lightning round. Are you ready?
Yeah.
We'll try to get through a couple quick things. Did you listen to the intro and the music?
I did.
What'd you think?
I listened to it both episodes, and the first episode I thought, oh wow, okay, that's a good classic Jerry Goldsmith Star Trek theme. I like it. Second watch through, I kind of feel like it's the wrong tone.
Why is that?
All these Star Trek shows more or less have the same tone to their theme song. Well, I should say it's a similar tone to me as Deep Space Nine.
Oh, okay. I would disagree. Yeah.
I might be misremembering the Deep Space Nine song. And it also is weirdly a similar tone to the theme from Enterprise. I know that sounds weird to say, but like it's a certain kind of like, they all have that certain like look up into the stars kind of tone.
Optimism.
To the song. Yeah. Whereas I feel like something like Voyager needs something a little bit with a little bit more juice to it to kind of support the, maybe it's the show I think it should be in my head, but like for this kind of thing where it's like they're out of their element, they're trying to get home, they're trying to figure out what's going on, two clashing people working together. It feels like it should be a little bit less just Star Trek, because it's a very Star Trek opening.
It is.
And it almost feels like, obviously not to the extent that they do this on this show, but it almost feels like they should have something closer to Lower Decks, where instead of just doing the usual you know, sweeping shots of the ship gliding through, you know, past a sunspot or something.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more hectic. But yeah, that was a long answer for a lightning round question.
Yeah, I think I like the Voyager. I think if I was not watching anything and I had no attachment to the series, I think that the Voyager theme song is my favorite of the Star Trek theme songs. I think it's the best. I think
It's a good song.
Yeah, I think that what I think it does is it captures the optimism of a journey in that way. Like, I think the song thematically matches Voyager quite well when it's coupled with the images too, which is the ship sort of flying through strange things and going somewhere that you're not really sure. DS9, I think, hits me better because I would describe DS9's theme as more somber, and it's more of a thoughtful kind of theme. It's slower. It's not as bombastic. I just really like the imagery of panning around the station and looking at the station as the song plays. I think that's neat. So DS9 is my favorite, but I understand people liking Voyager quite a bit too. So second lightning thing, the Doctor character. We didn't talk about him at all. Thoughts on Doctor?
Love the Doctor. I've always liked him in this cat. That was actually the first time I came across this actor, and every time I see him and stuff, I like him. He's a really great character actor. And they adding the element into it that he just wants someone to shut him off, and no one will shut the program off when they leave is great. It's a great idea for a character.
They don't
great way to kind of mix up the standard Doctor trope.
Yeah, I think he's the most original character concept out of everybody. He's a pretty unique construction. I like the fact that they set him up in a way that is not heavy-handed, which is that no one listens to him and they tell him to deactivate whenever they don't like what he's saying, which is a really good. There's clearly a lot of places to go with that, right? Like he will eventually become a respected character. He has to be, because they can't just spend the series telling him to shut up or whatever.
I can't wait till someone eventually falls in love with him. That's going to be a good one.
Yeah. The last headline,
you know it's going to happen.
Yeah. The last headlining character is Kes. Do you know who Kes is?
No. I mean, I know who the character is in this episode. I hope there's a black goo monster somewhere waiting to meet her. I just she seems a little superfluous right out of the gate, but
yeah, not a great personality either, really. And when you're just Netflix's when you're Neelix's girlfriend, it's not a great place to be starting off on. But
that's actually why Netflix doesn't have the show anymore.
I know.
It's because they asked to digitally change it so Neelix's name is now Netflix.
Yep.
For brand synergy, they said no.
Favorite character so far?
You know, honestly, it's kind of a hacky thing to say maybe, but I really like Janeway. I like her a lot. I think they do a great job of establishing her as a character establishing her as a captain who is as that video said, in the illustrious tradition of Captain Kirk and Jean-Luc Picard, but also is very clearly her own character. Like, she doesn't feel like she's a carbon copy of any of the other characters. I think she's got a lot of personality that comes through her very kind of like stoic front, because she does a great job of kind of relaxing that a bit when she's not on the bridge.
Yeah,
which I think is a really great way to play it. Yeah, I like her a lot so far.
My favorite thing about Janeway is that after Voyager gets knocked back and she gets up and her hair is all frazzled, when she cuts to the next scene, she has tightened her bun considerably, and she's a no-nonsense captain in that way. I like Janeway. I think that she does a good job of I get the sense that Janeway is trying to prove to everyone that she's a capable captain, because she's extremely rigid when in command, but when they have those private scenes, she lets her true self come out in those moments. And I think that that's like Archer never had that. Archer's just the same character no matter what the situation is. Yeah. Picard is always kind of reserved like that, and Sisko's more enigmatic, and it's hard to tell where he's coming from a lot of the time. So Janeway's unique in that regard. Tuvok's my favorite. I just like Tim Russ's performance. I think the Tuvok is very funny. I think that the lines he has there are great for a Vulcan and stuff like that, and he's just been a nice change of pace. Happy to see Quark in the opening. I miss Quark. It's good to see Quark again.
Yeah, that was a good Quark scene. I really like that scene where he badgers Harry Kim into him by accusing him of racism. I'm glad somebody called it out because I've been saying for years, it's like, oh, it's a Star Trek. There's no racism. Everyone is racist towards the Ferengi.
Yep.
Yeah, apparently they teach it at Starfleet Academy.
That's literally institutionalized racism right there. Yeah, yep. I like that. It's good to see him too. I think it's always a smart idea for these shows to start their pilot with a more established character and an actor who's familiar with playing the role that can help people get into the swing of things. It's good to see DS9.
Are you surprised it was Quark?
A little bit. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have cared if there were other DS9 characters who showed up too briefly, ever so briefly, even if they're just walking by or something like that. But Quark is not my favorite DS9 character, but it was kind of nice to see him again in a way. Like he's been the kind of character we've been lacking in Enterprise for a long time, where Quark is well defined. Like what he is as a character. You know who would have been nice to see only because it's a Maquis heavy show would be Garrick. Yeah, because they talk about the Cardassians, but they don't actually show you one. Yeah, they're just on the view screen. But I mean, the Maquis ship is the only one. Yeah, but it's just, that's that's opening a can of worms that this episode is clearly not. I mean, frankly, the show seems to be not interested in getting into, which is why I find it so frustrating, because it's like your concept of your crew is directly addressing these things, and you're choosing not to address them with the show itself. Well, that's what's so interesting is that the Maquis were created to kickstart Voyager. The whole purpose of sprinkling them into TNG and DS9 was to give Voyager a foothold that it could launch itself from. Oh, really? And if you just watch the series, it seems like they're a DS9 creation. Like DS9 actually did stuff with them in a way that the other shows never did. TNG was kind of just wishy-washy about it, but I don't know. If you got to kill a transporter clone of yourself, you call the Maquis. You do, absolutely. Let's see here. Caretaker, Chakotay, Tom Paris. I think that's everything. I think that's all my quick hits. So unless you have anything to say, I guess we can go to patron thoughts. I was just going to say a little bit of trivia that I found out today. Roxanne Dawson actually used to be married to Damar. Yes, I read that Deep too. Deep Space Nine. Yep. Yeah. His name is Casey Biggs. Casey Biggs, right? Casey Biggs at bat. Casey Biggs, yeah. Yep. Yeah. Divorced well before either of them ever entered the Star Trek universe. I know. They should have just paired them up. If I was a producer, that's all I would have done. If I know these people were exes, just be like, get Damar on Voyager, and we'll see what we can do with that. Also, the fans are going to love it. The fans who know your relationship history of these two actors before the internet exists, from the mid-'80s. Oh, my God, the fans are going to lose their minds. That's it. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll go to patron thoughts shortly. But I just wanted to remind everyone that this show is only possible. The way we're doing Voyager, covering all the episodes, is because of the support at patreon.com/The Pensky File. It's much appreciated. It keeps everything going. You're going to have access to Picard Season 2, our coverage of every single episode of that, only on patreon.com/The Pensky File. So it's a good reason as any to sign up. And you can thank everybody else who has got us to this goal level that makes us do all the Voyager episodes. If we fall below it, we're going to be skipping some Voyager episodes. So it's up to you to keep us above there. And then we'll be all happy. And you'll get Picard episodes too. Thank you, everybody, for being so generous and supporting the show. It does mean a lot, and it shows that you actually care about what we're talking about here, which is still surprising to me on a daily basis. If we ever do a live show with a crowd, the opening is going to be everybody turning to each other like Catholic Church and shaking each other's hands and saying thank you. I hate that at Catholic mass weddings or whatever it is. It's the most uncomfortable. So I understand this is the point of the religion. Just making friends, man. Peace be with you and also with you. Just looking deeply into the guy behind you's eyes and just saying like, peace be with you and happiness with you. It was always my least favorite and favorite part
of the thing because it's like I don't want to talk to anybody, so I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
But then once you start like looking around at people just half-assing their way through, it's when you have to the extended one where it's like you got to shake hands and say, and then like people talk to you. I don't have any interest in that.
Yeah.
What I like is like the dad who came with the rest of the family to church thing where he turns around, just kind of mumbles the words and just gives you like the two finger handshake, which is like like the slight tap, like you're handing off money to an informant.
Yeah, I didn't grow up with it, so it's all really strange to me. The strangest thing to me about Catholicism is I only know it from really the weddings. It's all I've been involved in, is that your weddings are too long, Catholics. There's no reason for an hour and a half wedding. It's absurd.
Brutal.
What I really love about it is, having not grown up with it, is when the priest is doing his thing, he'll say a bunch, he'll talk for like a paragraph or two, and then he'll pause. And to me, it seems like there's nothing to say, but everyone will just go, "So saith the snake who came down with the spider and fell on the apple." And it's like, oh my God, everyone said that at once. And then the priest continues on with the next thing. And then it goes back to the cloud came down and then there was this and he says, "So with us." And it's like, wow, this is incredible. Everyone knows the words. I don't know any of these words.
It is kind of weird how a Catholic mass goes from like, oh, this is kind of pleasant, to everybody knows these words and they're saying it like silently under their breath, and it's kind of creepy.
It is.
But yeah, I actually I still have Catholic wedding PTSD. The first two weddings I ever went to were from two of my uncles, and their weddings were both Catholic weddings, and they were the longest things I've ever sat through. So much so that at one of them, the bride passed out, like in the middle of the very long thing.
Yeah.
But so my PTSD from Catholic weddings is now, anytime I go to a wedding now, when it's over in like 15 minutes, I go, oh my God, I thought we were going to be here for an hour and a half. I didn't know weddings could be that short. So it's great because I'm always pleasantly surprised when modern weddings are like basically the Spaceballs wedding, when they're like, "Do you? Yes. Do you? Yes. All right, great."
Yeah, it gets to a point with those kind of weddings where I'm like, guys, you didn't even have to pick a poem. We could have just come in here and shook hands, and you guys are man and wife. We'll get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
No, I've been to a lot of Catholics and a few evangelical weddings, and I guess the difference would be that they're both like the same amount of time. It's the same amount of like people saying stuff, except there's a lot more hatred of gays and people who are going to burn in hell in evangelical weddings. I'm always amazed when the priest decides that this wedding is the time to start talking about this stuff. It's like, no one told this guy to just get the fuck out of here. It's so crazy to me.
I can't say I've ever encountered that.
Yeah, we have some. Amy has some evangelical friends that did the whole thing, and it's definitely, the priest is like, he's got some thoughts, and this wedding is the place to say them. So good for them. Anyway, Caretaker, thank you for supporting the show on patreon.com/the Pensky File. And now, well, first we thank the patrons. I feel like we haven't done a Star Trek episode in so long. A special thank you goes to our captain tier patrons, who include Ben Douglas, Targ Latif, Andrew Turlog, Joint Mango, Kyle Barrett, Mike Burnett, Christian Pouch, Michael Pine, Matthew Ross, Matt Cutler, Brandon Howells, Nick Sturgey, Grim Samda, Sean, Bradley Killens, Dwayne Hackett, Vault 13 Hero, Kevin Reyes, Darth Moss, Jordan Cooper, Russell Elch, Stephen Minton, HH28, Derek Zajac, Paul Roscoe, Jacob123, Patrick C. with Poindexter G, Dave Davies, Nick the Rat, Captain Brazen, Eric Santuan, Jakey's Gamer, Kevin Larry, Groppler, John Zorn, William Seisler, Rayhan Jaffer, Soylent Blue, Zane Majors, Olivier Pardeur, Tom Hickey, Jose Hunter, ZWNF Remixes, Diz Brutta, Captain McMunchausen, James McLennan, Ed Mark Starr, Jonas, Tommy Tango, Tuvix Must Die, Chris McLaughlin, Royo, and Rage Against the Machine. I don't care for Tuvix Must Die. I guess that's Tuvix, not Tuvok. I'm getting ahead of myself. Thank you, everybody, for supporting the show. It's much appreciated. So we got a lot of comments here, Clay. We'll try to read a couple of them, and then we can get some thoughts here. You can rest your eyes. Norman Buchwald says, Caretaker, so out of the series pilots so far, this is probably still the best one that introduces a whole slate of characters. As good as Emissaries is, it doesn't do as good a job. Given that, this pilot already has within itself a continuity issue, i.e. what happened to Harry Kim and B'Elanna Torres' fatal condition? It's a good question.
Great question.
Don't expect more about Chakotay owing Paris one, and of course, boy, did all those Maquis don on those Starfleet uniforms fast. Still, it's a good introduction and much promise to the slate of characters. 4 water vats out of 5 vots. Eric Sanchuan says, I think this is the most solid of the Star Trek pilot films, maybe because it was the third time at bat and they'd ironed out the kinks. The cast is good and they all seem to have good chemistry. Kate Mulgrew makes a very strong impression. Tim Russ is an excellent Vulcan, maybe the best since Nimoy, and Bob Picardo is always wonderful. Right now, I'm liking Neelix and Kess, but only right now. Dawson, Beltran, and McNeil are fine, but nothing to shout about. And Harry Kim? Well, I often forget the character exists. But overall, at this point, I basically like the crew, and it looks like it might be fun to follow them on their journey. Spoiler warning, this feeling doesn't last very long. Buckle up, gentlemen. Alex says, Voyager was my first real foray into Star Trek when I was growing up and holds a special place in my heart for that reason. However, I started watching it in season 4 and 5, perhaps the pinnacle of Voyager's run. If I had started from the beginning and with the Caretaker, maybe I'd have given up and watched Babylon 5 instead. I always hated the boring Deep South barn scene on the Caretaker's array, and the scenes of the crew escaping from the underground Okampa city were the least exciting escape ever. The Kazon are a poor man's Klingon, and what was the Caretaker doing to the crew it captured? Inseminating them to create some kind of new hybrid children who would look after the Okampa? Character-wise callouts, Janeway is great from the start. Tuvok is the best Vulcan since Spock straight off the bat. Tom Paris adds some initial humor, but always seems too by the book for a criminal in this first episode. The Doctor is textbook TNG era character looking for their humanity with a pinch of McCoy grump. 2 Talaxian bubble baths out of 5.
Yeah, I think he mentioned something that I think is missing. Nobody on this crew has an edge to them, really. Like, by the end of this episode, everybody's kind of like on the same page, and I think there needs to be an element of, if not straight up chaos, it's just something that feels like there's gonna be there's oil in the water to some extent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's just like, Paris is a criminal who's got a really dicey past about jumping ship, but as soon as he's back on the con, he's like, well, it's great to be back in Starfleet.
They spend a lot of time with Paris,
Chakotay,
too. He's the introductory character that sort of sets the stage with Janeway about it, and he just eventually... I wouldn't say they do a terrible job, because I'm fairly certain that his point is to be a man who's kind of caught between worlds. He doesn't really know whether he's a Maquis or Federation person. Yeah. I think that comes across slightly, to his credit.
Yeah. But we don't really get enough of B'Elanna Torres to see where she's at. And Chakotay is, at least in this episode, not really pushing back too much. So there's just nothing. I want to say it needs a Garak type character, but maybe not quite as unpredictable as that. But just something. Yeah, duplicitous, a good word. But just something to kind of show that there's gonna be some stuff, some ideas or actions that are gonna be mixing things up a bit.
Yeah, I mean, what's funny is that for as novel sounding as the idea is, like a Maquis and a Starfleet crew stuck somewhere, DS9 was kind of the same thing. It was Starfleet officers coming in with Bajoran forces that were already there. So it was like Odo, Quark, Kira, characters who weren't Starfleet members or Federation members or whatever. And I think that show is better set up for it. But that show I thought believably played those two factions against each other. And if not against each other, there was a difference of opinion with those characters where things would be different for Kira than they were for Sisko and things like that. I think Voyager would have benefited.
I shouldn't say Garak. You need a Kira in the show.
Sure.
So, or a Kira, but also Akira, like actually, like from the anime. That'd be pretty cool.
Janeway!
But you know what I mean? Like, Chakotay!
He does have the better name.
But yeah, I think you need a Kira type character who is like, she's on the team, but she's got her own agenda in some places. Yeah. And I think having 2 or 3 Maquis characters is a good setup for that. But if they do that, great. But it doesn't feel like they're going to do that. So
let's see. The next comment is, I'm sorry, I lost it here. Poindexter G says, Voyager's pilot has a lot of things to do to set up the show, introduce characters, get everyone to the Delta Quadrant, tell an entertaining story. and how well it does all those objectives varies. It spends quite a bit of time with all the characters and gives us a very solid Trek-style mystery. The welcoming party upon arriving in the Delta Quadrant has a very original series vibe to it, and the Caretaker's inability to give a straight answer seems very much like the kind of crap Captain Kirk always had to deal with. Where it really starts to falter is in showing us the Kazon, the Ocampa, I can't remember if it's Ocampa or Ocampa, I'll say, and the Caretaker dynamic, having literally everyone except our heroes being that irrational starts to get old pretty quick. It makes Janeway's decision at the end, the most significant thing she does in regards to importance in the series, really lack any punch because we honestly don't care about any of these people. And as she honestly never heard of a fuse. I agree with you about the point of Janeway not landing. Latte Librarian, good to see you, Latte Librarian. It's been a while. I think you gave up on Enterprise after a couple seasons. Caretaker, love seeing Quark again. Aside from some less than tasteful jokes, this holds up as an okay pilot, which is about the best you can expect from a Trek show of this era. I like Janeway's discussion with the Caretaker about how children have to grow up. However, it does seem like they could have just left a bomb behind to take care of the array. Also, my mother watched this show in the first run and has said, quote, "It's horrible, it's bad, it's not worthy," end quote. And she felt betrayed that the first woman captain was for such a terrible show. 3 underground cities out of 5. Eric McGowan says, Wes may stand...
endorsement.
We'll bring your mother on the show to see her opinion is.
Yeah, let's get her on.
Eric McGowan says, Wes may stand by Emissary as the best Trek pilot. I do. But I have always preferred Voyagers. The overarching plot is only functional, but as a pilot, however, it does a great job introducing the main cast and giving everyone something to do and setting up potential threads for the series. It also does well at establishing the remote, hostile, and strange setting of the Delta Quadrant. This is always the Trek show and pilot I show to non-Trekkies and has worked every single time. 5 Sporocystian life forms out of 5. I don't remember that word from the thing, but I'll take your word for it. That is interesting about this working for people.
Yeah, that's really fascinating because I mean, I guess maybe that answers my question about how much buy-in you need to get on board with this show. Maybe it's less than I think.
Yeah. So you're saying your buy-in was the Maquis, understanding what the thing is about the Maquis?
Yeah, because it seems to be the one series that is rooted in like specific sequel canon type stuff. Whereas Enterprise is, what happened before Captain Kirk, and TNG is what happened after Captain Kirk, and Deep Space Nine is we're on a space station.
Well, I mean, for DS9's case, do you think that if you don't know the Borg and Picard, does that really lessen the impact of that opening for you? Like, I think you can understand what it's doing, but
yeah, maybe a little bit. I mean, I think you can, his wife dying is pretty universal.
Yeah. I think you could understand it if you didn't know Picard. Like I don't think it would have, because what I think is so effective is that the Picard stuff in DS9 shows you that this is a very different series. They're literally being hostile to Picard in that one. So I think that it sets you up as someone who, if you're familiar with that, you go, oh, the show is doing something different here with this stuff,
Yeah. Yeah, I think I don't know if you quite get that as much in Voyager because the stuff they're dealing with is like direct to, because at the beginning of Deep Space Nine, it starts with Picard and the Borg, but then it's from that point it skews off into its own thing pretty quickly for the most part. Like to the point it's the stuff they're doing is new enough that you're not missing anything. If you haven't seen like the other Cardassian episodes or whatever of TNG. This one, it's kind of like they are specifically using a concept and idea that is a pretty deep cut of Star Trek lore as like kind of the basis for their show. And so it surprises me. But again, they iron that shit out so quickly that maybe it doesn't even matter. Yeah. Like maybe that's why, maybe it's actually, it stands to be worse for people like us who have been dealing with the Maquis across 3 shows now.
Yeah.
And all the different kind of things that are going on with them. To see that sort of like sidelined, maybe it stands out more to us than it would to someone who comes in, more or less blank.
Yeah.
And just sees, oh yeah, these people don't like each other. They used to be Federation. Okay, now I guess they're now back in the Federation again.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's a good point. James McLennan says, as Star Trek pilots go, this is one of the better ones. The characters are the strength of the episode and the saving grace of the series as a whole, and they're largely drawn in a way that is consistent with how they'll be portrayed. I don't think Voyager has an equivalent to TNG's Season 1 Angry Picard. Overall, this is a somewhat perfunctory episode whose average plot is a vehicle to get the two crews stranded. It's typical to make the obvious complaint that the Maquis crew assimilated too quickly, but if you take it for what it is, then you have a generally positive experience. 3 out of 5. That Kid Ben says, new to Trek and Neelix responding, that's an impressive title. I don't understand any of it. Sums up my thoughts on the franchise. I think it'd be cool if Starfleet uniforms were made of a synthetic latinum so they can't be replicated and always earned. It's a beautiful sentiment when Tuvok won't make Neelix one, but the idea it presents is destroyed by putting the Maquis into uniforms. 4 out of 5 for that reason. It's true. Tuvok just didn't like Neelix right from the start. He's not going to give him that thing. He respects that.
I think I don't like Neelix's design.
Yeah.
He
looks like he's a tiger person. He looks like a furry, like a horrible furry costume.
And the clothes he's wearing, he seems like they just watched The Mask and designed a, like, you know, I can see him on the poster being like, you know, he's the, and I think he needs to be a little bit more slippery than that. And not just sort of like, he's clearly going to be like the comic relief guy.
Yeah.
And I don't really know if we need that in our lives so much.
Barry Wallace says, it's the second best pilot after Emissary. Thank you, Barry. It does a really good job of introducing the characters in the ship, and it gets us to the Delta Quadrant in a somewhat believable way. I remember watching the premiere back in 95 and being really excited when it was over. It seemed like they were going on a Trek version of a Dungeons & Dragons style quest to find the Caretaker's mate. Super exciting. Spoiler alert, that's not the path they choose to follow. Either way, it's so much better than Enterprise, and I'm looking forward to listening to you guys break it down. 4 dried up old caretakers out of 5. Thank you, Barry. We'll be getting through this post-haste.
You know I've seen part of the finale, like the series finale.
Endgame.
And maybe I'm just Endgame, yes. Maybe I'm just misremembering it, and I don't think that I am. I'm surprised they didn't go back to the well with this thing and be like, oh yeah, we found the thing. Remember that sister we talked about 7 seasons ago?
Caretaker.
Yeah. Yeah, we found him. Like, you know, I don't know.
I would have had them found the second caretaker on Earth and been like, God damn it. Like, of all the places we could have found you.
Son of a bitch.
It's always the last place you look.
What
it's
do
like
you
car
mean?
Keys.
The second caretaker had the key to my house, and I've been dating him for 3 years. But, you know, I think actually that would have been an interesting situation, because I think that's where your choice thing would have been a good place to put that. So, like, if your series finale is you have Voyager meet up with the other caretaker who has the ability to send them home, and then you put Janeway in a position where she has to choose between whether or not they send them home and, like, a planet dies or something.
Yeah.
And I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah.
I know that's not what they do, but
it's a bookend. It's a potential bookend. Jonathan J.K. Morris says, beginnings are always fraught, but the characters are mostly acted intact and no huge changes even until the very end of Season 7. But it's that double-edged sword of the show's writing consistency. Speaking of which, Janeway's speech where the undetermined number of Maquis are made Starfleet officers off camera instead of over the season, immediately throwing away the main conceit of the show that the 2 other Star Trek shows help set up. Fascinating squandering because of UPN's understanding of its audience. 4 lost Maquis Raiders out of 5. Tom House says,
what does that mean? Do they not? Is it like a known quantity that people don't really give a shit about the Maquis as far as fans of the show go?
You mean for UPN's understanding of its audience?
Yeah,
I think that he means that the executives would have wanted them to just give up on this fandom idea of the Maquis being different and just make them all Starfleet characters. The Berman argument that they just need to be Starfleet characters.
That was lower on my list of things that I wanted in this show. They seem to not do the other ones until a few seasons later.
My
long list.
My drunk stepbrother couldn't understand the heady prophet nonsense you were talking about in Emissary. This wife's dead. I don't understand any of that. Just
I told him that in the first episode. I told him in the first episode of DS9, don't worry, you're gonna see a couple of big orbs. And he unfortunately he thought I meant something else and not prophet glowing balls. Even saying that, I understand now the miscommunication. I apologize to my brother. Michael, Rick Berman, co-creator of the show. Can we just not confuse my brother?
It's probably all where it
This will be the first of many requests over the next few seasons, but let's just start off clean so my brother will talk to me again.
Tom Heil says, Caretaker, my favorite Trek debut episode, starting with the stylistic trappings of the TNG era, but with an epic, almost movie-like tone. 5 out of 5. Neelix, the Kazon, and the Ocampa are effective in making the Delta Quadrant feel very different, a more primitive part of the galaxy, very far from the familiar neighborhood seen in TNG. Setting the seeds for the conflict with the Maquis made for a skillful transition from TNG to avoid making the setting just another Starfleet crew and more of the same. That said, I always thought it was a strange coincidence that a ship thrown to the other side of the galaxy just happens to be designated Voyager. That's the theme for you. Christian Pouch says, the best produced...
You know, I was just going to say, much like the idea of the second Caretaker, I can't wait to see how Rick Berman's brother, this new character we've created, never shows up again for the rest of the season.
Also thematically appropriate.
Be fun to check back in with him from time to time to see how he's enjoying the show.
Christian Pouch says, the best produced Trek pilot at the time, Caretaker has a very strong premise, but lacks the clear character definitions present in something like Emissary, or at best, it fails to really delve into them. There's plenty of silly here, but the Delta Quadrant has a good wild feel compared to what we've known before, even if they'd never heard of harvesting water from comets. Unfortunately, they rushed the ending in the Maquis integration, a taste of what's to come when they drop plot lines that they should have kept focus on. 4 out of 5. Grapple John Zorn says, well, they got the Doctor right. 2 nonsensical, disjointed vignettes out of 5. The first negative.
Wow, that's it? Yeesh. Yeah.
Patrick Seba says, Caretaker, stoddy, you left us too soon, sensual and sarcastic, now replaced by gloom. I do not know why they sent her to die and left us piloted by buffoons. 2 black betazoid eyes out of 5. Kyle Barrett says, doesn't seeing DS9 again in all its grainy SD glory make you just want to watch that show instead? Voyager has a brilliant premise, and the best moments of the episode are when it takes advantage of that rather than the fairly lame sci-fi plot of an old man with a banjo systematically raping his way through the known galaxy. The character introductions are great, but they all happen a little too fast, and I'd rather spend more time grounding the characters in their world before pulling them out of it and sticking them in the Delta Quadrant after 20 minutes. The concept of an integrated crew is great, but rewatching this episode, I had forgotten who were originally Starfleet and who were Maquis, which shows how little it'll matter to the series. Overall, the premise and the character setups get a 4 out of 5, the plot strays into 2 out of 5 territory, and so overall, Caretaker is the first of many Voyager 3 out of 5s.
Maybe that's what we do. We set our next goal at $1,500. We will jump ship off of Voyager and do Deep Space Nine again.
I'd be down. Some of those early episodes didn't have good audio quality, just to go back and fix that. It's like a yearbook photo. Matt Ross says, you heard it here, people, our $1,500 goal. That's it. Matt Ross says, when I first saw this at the original premiere, I was excited and interested by the crawl and wondered what the heck was happening to the ship of unknown people, like the guy intently fixing the lights behind Chakotay, and why the Voyager had to even go there. This 2-part episode does a pretty decent job of explaining the characters, from the new captain, uptight, fast-walking Janeway, the noob Kim, the swarmy, branded Locarno in Paris, the reluctant rebel in Chakotay, and the at first sleazy Neelix. The Kazon with their bad hair seem pathetic, and the Caretaker's plan not well thought out, which upon reflection makes sense as he is the reason for the destruction of the Ocampan planet. Janeway's reason to stay, however, makes the least sense. She could have at least gone and planted multiple remote bombs if she was concerned, but even so, the Voyager's involvement is so light. I almost get the impression Janeway doesn't want to go back to her fiancé and dogs. Overall, a good start of a stranded ship with limited supplies and 2 crews. A solid 3 out of 5. Jonas says, Caretaker, the series premiere was pretty good. Janeway's a good captain, and Picardo's character is charmingly cantankerous, CF Bones. In structure, the plot at least in part, recalls that of the original pilot of TOS, a crew forced into a simulated environment and experimented on by unknown agents. My greatest issue with the episode is that the plot seems all over the place, too many characters, races, places, quadrants, and so on, but I suppose you have to expect that from a pilot that sets things up. An angry, blue-uniformed guy in the beginning who distrusts Paris looks like Kevin Nealon. 2 out of 5. Benjamin.
Isn't it weird that Robert Picardo's last name is Picardo?
Yes.
And he's got a haircut very similar to Jean-Luc Picard's. Is there something there?
It could be. It's destiny or something like that, I think. It's one of those things, Bob Picardo. No name really.
When are we
going
to get after Star Trek Picard cancels after the 3rd season or ends after the 3rd season? They should shift to Star Trek Picardo and just be like a day-to-day seeing what's up with Robert Picardo.
Just the behind the scenes with Bob Picardo. I could see it.
Mm-hmm.
Or just make it a Hawaii 5-0 crossover and call it Picardo and have him be no one like that at all. Like that would work. Benjamin Espinoza says, after Enterprise, this was like watching a Shakespeare production. Fine performances, except for Harry Kim. Clearly defined... Yeah, well, I'll get back to that. Clearly defined archetypes and a genuine sci-fi mystery. Don't worry, Neelix will grow on you. Great start to an underrated series. 5 corn on the cobs out of 5. What'd you think of Harry Kim?
Nobody ate them. She made so much corn and nobody ate that corn.
I know. The blob will eat them.
By the way, my favorite part of this episode, though 2 episodes, is when Janeway sees the blob for the first time. The look on her face is amazing. She's just like... She's like trying to keep it together, but she's clearly registering that this is a talking amorphous blob. It's great.
Does she have his corpse at the end? Is that like in her ready room, the little stone that he turns into?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess. Yeah.
Harry Kim. Harry Kim's a focal character here. I liked Harry Kim in this. I thought he was a pretty decent audience avatar type character. What'd you think?
Yeah, I liked him. It's just so strange because they sideline him in such a weird way, but at the same time, I wouldn't want him to be like front and center in the action because he's just he's a dumb ensign. He has nothing.
Yeah.
I think he works well in the role that he plays, which is the audience's inroad to the show, and then later kind of works as kind of a emotional motivation for Janeway. Not just him, but like he's that story that she tells about talking to his mother and stuff is like a nice little emotional beat for Janeway. So I think he works out pretty well. I don't know, all that stuff when they're walking around learning the secret history of the underground people is kind of boring to me.
Yeah.
But
Royo says, we get introduced to Nicholas Locarno, renamed Tom Paris. However, as the Star Trek franchise already owned Locarno, given that Ron Moore wrote the character on staff and would not have to pay him royalties to use it, it remains a mystery to this day why they pointlessly changed his name. Since Tom Paris and Locarno have practically identical backstories, it's somewhat pointless to pretend they're different characters. So it's interesting to see a talented leader whose career and life were very thoroughly derailed to be given a second chance in Starfleet. That said, the Voyager arch-nemesis Banjo Man torturing the crew with his music and medical experiments is pretty ridiculous, and using the LA Convention Center as a stand-in for an alien planet was not impressing me as I've been there many times. I've heard this episode criticized repeatedly for Janeway stranding them all in the Delta Quadrant because she didn't think to use a bomb with a timed fuse, but now that I rewatch the episode, I can see that the array clearly has technology far beyond the Federation's comprehension, since it can link different galaxies together and accidentally doom planets. The array is also soon to be surrounded by the Kazon, and the method used to get across the galaxy killed a great deal of the Voyager crew. The decision to destroy the array before they overrun is not the show's original sin. I was told it was. 3 out of 5.
Yeah, how... I would think the question would be, when Janeway is like, send us back, how come Chakotay or someone else is like, hi, yeah, when we got here, half our crew was murdered by the explosion.
They weren't sitting down. They didn't have a chance to buckle. They didn't have a chance to buckle up.
So, like, I mean, the ship might make it, but I don't think anybody on the ship will survive the trip.
I think the first officer was like mid-run, and they jumped, and he just smashed his face into the panel, so that was the end of him. Brandon Howell says, we're almost, only a couple comments left. Brandon Howell says, a confusing start to a confusing series. Why are Harry and B'Elanna made ill by the caretaker, and how are they mysteriously healed? I hate the whole working bee scene almost as much as I will come to hate the Kazon. Janeway bites off her lines like, I'm the female captain and you must listen to me. The ship's one doctor and the entire nursing staff get killed. Yeah, right. Neelix is a very sketchy dude, and Tom Paris saying that Chakotay owes him his life is just plain offensive. 3 exploding arrays out of 4. We're redefining.
Wow. Really?
Redefining.
Really pulled the stick up on the plane at the end there.
It did, yeah. Just landed gently. Andrew Cherlog says, a strong pilot that sets up a great premise. Having the moral question of the array in the Kazon Ocampa force is a tough decision. The only real awkward aspect is them not being able to use the Nicholas Locarno name due to copyright dispute. Strong opener, though they would chicken out later on. 3 out of 5.
Can you expand on that? Do you know any of that, the history of that? I don't know what that is.
So Robert Duncan McNeil played a character called Nicholas Locarno in TNG's First Duty, which is that he's one of the cadets who gets in trouble with Wesley Crusher at the academy because they do an illegal maneuver and they try to cover it up, so they lose. They all get punished for that. The original concept is sort of the pop culture thing that I don't actually know is true because Royo is disagreeing with it, but some people mentioned it, is that the original idea was supposed to be that this character was going to be Nicholas Locarno as kind of a redemption arc for that character. And so that's why they cast Duncan McNeil, because he is that character here. And the pop culture thing is that it was some sort of royalty thing where they didn't want to pay to use that character name, so they just renamed the character but kept him exactly the same.
Huh. I wonder why they would have to pay royalties on a character that was in the show that they produced.
I don't know. I think that's Royo's point, is that it was, if it's written by a staff writer and it wasn't from a pitch, then I don't know what it would be. But that's the general sense of what the story is. And then the final comment, I think, Kieran Simmons, new patron, says, good cold open, and this series has the best opening credits both musically and visually out of all the series. Surprising how much of the pilot centers around Kim and Paris given how irrelevant they become. Tuvok is a good Vulcan, and Neelix is not that annoying yet. Good costume, too. The Kazon are unsavable from the beginning, but overall it's a good start to a series. Echoes of Emissary in the setup, and the Caretaker aliens. Thanks, everybody. There was a lot of comments on the opening episode for Voyager called Caretaker. Everyone seemed mildly positive on it. No one seemed extremely positive. No one was really down on it. So, Clay, on our scale of 1 to 5, what are you going to give Caretaker, the pilot for Star Trek Voyager?
I'm going to go with a 3. I think as I said, the characters I think are really great right off the bat. It's just, the name of this show feels like it should have been Star Trek Cruise Control, because that kind of feels like what they're doing here. Like coming off of Deep Space Nine, which is like too heady for people or whatever, and knowing where we end up with Enterprise. Yeah, this feels like the franchise sort of like clicking it into neutral and just coasting for a while, where they're not really shaking it up that much, and there's plenty of stuff that you can recognize. Yeah. Despite them having a really kind of novel concept, even the episode itself is like just kind of middling for me outside of the characters themselves, which I do really like so far.
Yeah, I was a little upset with reading the Memory Alpha thing about how much Michael Pillow was like, we would just want to make this like a little bit more of an action adventure show, like get away from the sort of, if not to call it heady, like the sort of like philosophical stuff. And I don't think this is a decision that pays off for the franchise, quite frankly. Like if that does not seem to be the way that it worked. If not knowing much about Voyager, but knowing that's to me a description of what Enterprise was trying to do, was that kind of thing, and that was not successful at all in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't even think that applies to this episode. Like if that's, like I said, if that's what they were trying to do, I don't think they really pulled it off, because there's still plenty of just hanging around, walking in hallways and talking about shit. Like it doesn't even get quote unquote exciting until the last act of the 2-hour movie or whatever.
I think the first bit's actually kind of exciting. I like the opening of this episode the most.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I like that stuff.
Good opening, and I mean, but as far as like the like really kind of like the Starfleet guys being active and stuff. That doesn't really happen till late into the show. And it didn't feel any more or less actiony than say like a TNG episode or something. But
yeah, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 too. I enjoyed it. Mostly, I'm a bit relieved that the characters seem much more likable than Enterprise's characters. Like a couple of people have mentioned this in the Patreon comments too. I find that will go a long way for Voyager, I think.
Yeah. I think so.
As long as you have characters that you kind of like, you can deal with some more middling episodes. I didn't find the Enterprise characters did that, but I like the setup. I think the characters are all well drawn. I think that even if they're not having interesting scenes or a plot between them at this point, I liked them interacting with each other. I thought that there was some like juice to some of the stuff that was going on there. So I like that. I don't care for the Caretaker plot. I think it was boring and generic and not particularly suited for what this show was trying to do as a pilot or as a series. So I'll just give it a 3 out of 5 because I thought it was fine. I thought it was okay. Emissary is still better as a pilot. That's my final thought.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that.
All right. We're done. Thanks, everybody. Patreon.com/The Pensky File. That's the final time I'll say it for this episode. All the Picard Season 2 episodes are going to be up there, and you get to ensure that we keep covering Voyager. Thank you very much for listening. Clay, do you have anything you want to say?
Thanks for checking out, and keep checking out the Rotten Horror Picture Show, the horror movie podcast that Amanda and I do, where we talk about movies off the Rotten Tomatoes 200 best horror movies of all time list. And on Patreon this year, we are doing Junior Varsity and or B Team Stephen King adaptation movies. I don't know what month. Are we in March right now? Is that
this will be the end of February?
This comes out end of February. So at this point, we'll have done It Chapter 2 in January. February is Silver Bullet, and March through November are going to be random, and then December will be the 1990 TV movie of It, which I did look up, and I believe that was one of back in the day where it was like a 2-tape thing, you know, where you go to the video store and it's like it's so
chunky.
Big as 2 VHS tapes,
which
is the mark of like a long movie. I believe the entire 1990 television miniseries is like maybe 25 minutes longer than It Chapter 2 by itself.
Oh, okay.
It's
Sit
long
down.
Movies are not what they once were, you know.
You guys can check all that out on Patreon. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Hope you enjoy it. We're looking forward to...
I think we might have Badass back at this point. I'm not entirely sure. Either way, Badass will be coming back if it's not already with Batman Beyond.
Yeah, yeah. If you've gotten Sean's recording, it'll be back at this point.
Yeah, so we will be doing that for the foreseeable future.
Cool. Guys, thanks very much for listening. I was happy to start Voyager. Going into it, I was like, oh no, another Star Trek series. But I thought it was fine. Honestly, the worst thing about this one is that it was a double-parter, and I was kind of like done after one episode. I was like, that's enough. I feel like it's too much. So the next one, which is I think called Parallax, I'll be interested how I feel about just a 42-minute Voyager episode to see how that works in and of itself.
I hope that's about when they have to square off against an evil Hal Jordan after he's killed all of the other Green Lanterns and stealing all the ring power for himself.
Well, luckily Neelix wears a bright yellow costume and he can't be affected by it, so it's all fine.
Yep.
That's what they're building towards. Thanks, everybody.
Man,
we're done.
Dumbest thing in comic book history, maybe, that the Green Lantern's only weakness is the color yellow.
I mean... Yeah, I guess Superman had some backstory there. It's a rock, but it's a rock that he knows. It is kind of a weird thing. What can he do? He just can't touch anything that's yellow? He can't
I honestly don't think the ring I don't think the ring works on it. So like if you rob a bank wearing a banana suit, you're going to get away. Cuz
isn't the evil lanterns, are they not yellow? Is that not their color?
They are. Yes.
They are yellow.
Yellow is the bad ones, yeah.
Okay. Can yellow work against green?
Great question. Well, I hopefully we'll cover it next episode.
Stay tuned, everybody. Parallax comes up, and we're going to talk about power rings and why the charging is inefficient. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next time.